Hey YouTube, so this is my second video. I guess starting kind of from scratch. My parents had me, and from about 11 I started to display signs of Tourette syndrome, and back at that time nobody really knew what that was, and my mom, God bless her heart, part of my Tourette's was saying swear words like really fast, and I couldn't help it. And the more someone noticed it, the more I would display those tics, and so my mom would wash my mouth out with soap, and I was extremely bullied as a child in school. People didn't understand. I had the teachers. People thought I was crazy. My mom took me to a mental institution. She would wash my mouth out with soap all the time. I would like to just say that she felt so guilty afterwards. She was crying once we found out that I had Tourette syndrome and that there was a physical reason for my behavior. And then, I've been beat up in school because of my behavior. I'm not being able to, the more someone notices the tics, the worse they become. And especially going through puberty at that time. Before that, I was like a straight A student. I had lots of friends. And then when all this stuff started to happen, it just became really awful. I should also mention that my parents did the very, very best that they could. However, part of my story is really neglect and oppression, extreme oppression, not being allowed to be angry or upset or display happiness or anything. I was supposed to sit down and shut up. Kids are meant to be heard or seen and not heard, and that was a very common thing back in those days. I'm 46 now, so being 6, 7, 8 years old, that was then. That was the culture back then, right? And so I don't blame my parents at all. They did the very best they could with what they had at the time, and I don't want to kind of out my parents, but I know that they both lived through some very traumatic things as well. And so you can't teach what you don't know, and when you don't know it. You just don't know. So I just don't want them to feel bad if they ever come across this, because I know that they did the very, very best they could, and right now, without them, I would probably be on the street. So Tourette syndrome, because it wasn't a very known disease at the time, my school appointed one of my peers to make a tick mark on a list every time I displayed a tick. And at the end of one school day, not including recess or lunch, there was over 1,600 ticks on this piece of paper. And I was humiliated, mortified, bullied as a result. It was terrible. It was fucking awful. And also being poor. We were quite poor. My parents, again, were doing the very best they could, and we had hand-me-down clothes and hand-me-down books, and so I got books that are already written over, and I couldn't make them mine, and it was really awful in my experience at that age. So I guess that's it for that part. As I grew older, I ended up quitting school. before, so because of Tourette syndrome, I got kicked out of school, and my mom had to fight with the school board of Surrey because they didn't want to let me back into school, but they wanted to charge my parents $1 for every day I didn't go to school, but they wouldn't let me back in school. So it was an extremely stressful time for all of us, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was so young. I didn't have a clue. I'm just being brought places, and I was in a mental institution for a little while, and because they just didn't know what was wrong with me, and I went to UBC for some test medication, and back then it was starting to be known what Tourette syndrome was, I just had such a hard time in school that I just never completed it. I discovered sex, or I discovered dressing like a slut when I was about 13, and the power I felt, the attention that I got. And it made me feel good. Even though it was wrong attention, it was the only kind of loving attention I felt I got. And so I, of course, dressed slutty more and more all the time, and I would use shirts as dresses, primarily just to get attention of some kind, whether it was bad or good, you know, just getting some sort of, oh, someone wants me attention, not knowing that it was really the bad kind of attention. And then life progressed, and I discovered sex. And once I discovered sex, oh, wow, there was no holds barred. I finally found the way that I could get love. And so I proceeded to be very promiscuous. Throughout that time, I remember sleeping outside my home, but waking up to being sexually assaulted, and not even knowing that that wasn't okay. Not knowing that that wasn't a normal thing. I'm not really sure why I didn't know that at that time, but I don't know. But yeah, that happened a couple of different times where I was woken up and someone was touching me or having sex with me, and it just wasn't safe ever. But I didn't know it wasn't safe because I'd never had safety, I thought. And anyways, so that's kind of from childhood to, you know, when I quit school. I'll continue with after that. On my next video, that'll go from, you know, what happened after I discovered sex, and I don't know how long we'll get through till then. If you want to follow my story, hit subscribe. You know, I really hope that this helps someone to know that they're not alone, and you know, hopefully it helps me in my journey of healing. Thanks. Bye.